Having now sunk over 15 hours into GreedFall, I wanted to create a review of it, because this game definitely gets better as you play it, but it also has flaws. So if you're watching this before you buy GreedFall, hopefully this will help you out. I mean, it was a game made by a tiny studio with only 40 people in it, so it obviously is going to have pros and cons. Let's start out at the beginning, because to be honest, when I first started playing the prologue of GreedFall, it was really boring. I hated it, and I almost didn't upload the 1 hour walkthrough on my channel, which was edited down from 3 hours of monotonous gameplay. It was literally just 3 hours of talking, which can be okay, but because the game starts off by introducing you to 5 of its 6 different factions, and then you have to do a quest for each one of those factions, you end up being completely overwhelmed by an abundance of random names like the Bridge Alliance, the Thalam, the Nauts, the Congregation of Merchants, the Natives, and which faction is who, and who is at war with who, and why they're at war with this person, and it's ridiculous. It's like a political simulator. And yes, you are playing a diplomat, which also sounds very boring, but Jesus Christ, it's meant to be a video game. I'm meant to be having fun, and it was just so dull. So you're constantly trying to piece together who is who, and because of this, many of the side quests feel rather meaningless, and they just don't really make sense to you yet until you really get into the game, which is some 5 hours onwards. When you finally visit the main island and the different cities and begin to actually understand what each faction is about, you begin to realize that the storyline is actually really exciting and interesting, with meaningful factions, reputations with those factions, and several different endings depending on the decisions you make in the storyline. But you've really just got to grit your teeth and get through the start of the game and try and embrace it and learn all of the factions and what they're about to actually figure that out for yourself. So once you actually make it through the prologue, you can finally experience the combat properly. I personally really enjoyed the combat system, though it definitely has its pitfalls. Firstly, it looks a lot more in depth than it actually is. You effectively have melee, magic damage, and stasis, which like freezes enemies, and firearms and also traps, and that is really it. I found it was rather boring to actually specialize your character into only using magic. I went for magic, and after a while I decided to spec my character into melee and magic instead of just magic. And then I started to enjoy the combat on a new level because I was working different skills together and it became a lot more satisfying. I did find the dodge skill though to be rather overpowered because you don't have a stamina bar and it's very easy to dodge enemies' attacks if you're not outnumbered and have multiple foes running at you at once. Especially the Guardian bosses, because once you know their moveset, I mean, you literally just have to press A in the other direction and you dodge all their stuff really, and that's it. That said though, the boss fights were actually really enjoyable and some of the best parts and most challenging parts in the game. But this is definitely not Dark Souls by any stretch of the imagination. I saw some people saying it had Dark Souls-like combat. It just doesn't at all. The combat's very easy compared to Dark Souls. Recently, I've actually been playing the game on extreme difficulty, which is the hardest difficulty. So the only real difference seems to be that you actually get punished even harder for not dodging attacks. So when something hits you, it hits you really hard. This obviously does make the game a little bit more challenging, though I did find magic to be rather overpowered because it does ignore armor and the AI never seems to actually block your magical attacks. But the melee, on the other hand, can be blocked and also parried, so it makes it rather more enjoyable than the magic spells and just running around slinging magic at everyone, which gets boring on its own, which is why I suggest you pair things up and really experience the different elements of combat together at once, because that's where the game truly shines. And I mean, the game has a lot of perks to improve your combat prowess that increase attack speed, damage, and they're relatively simple though. They don't really give you that much extra flavor. Like, they don't give you extra combos or extra different abilities to use with your melee attacks, which is why I think it's funner to mix it up and use magic guns and melee at the same time. I do feel like the overall combat though could really use some work, especially in terms of adding more depth to it. You have a very limited moveset, with each weapon only having a few different animations for heavy and fast attacks, which made it quite limiting, which disappointed me. But aside from that, I found myself really enjoying the combat, especially the boss fights that exist throughout the game. You can also have 2 party members in your party, and there are 5 different people to choose from that you meet on your travels, each with their own motivations and alliances to different factions, which can make the game very interesting, because depending on which 2 people you have in your party following you at that time, they'll actually weigh into the conversations of the game dialogues, and you can create confrontation between party members and between whoever you're talking to. Like, for example, I took the native Sayora to the Thalim faction, a very religious, zealous faction who consider the natives to be heretics. In fact, they consider everyone not following their religion to be heretics, which makes the game quite tense and exciting at times when you encounter these situations. Or sometimes she'll give you some backstory about the natives that you otherwise never would have known had she not been in your party at the time. So each of your companions has their own backstory and their personal questline that you can do with them later to either romance or just befriend them. Having their trust can also allow you to sway them in certain situations where you otherwise wouldn't have. So it's very believable and it works really well in that sense. Your followers also have preset combat abilities. They're pretty competent in battle, but you can't actually control them yourself. And I know a lot of people like that from games like Dragon Age, but personally, I really don't mind it. They can just do their own thing and I can concentrate on what I'm doing, which is a lot more enjoyable to me. I did find, however, that they were just tanking a lot of AoE boss abilities, which caused them to die quite early on in boss battles. They do revive themselves after combat though, so it's really not a problem. You can, however, customize all their equipment and everything they're wearing and what weapons they're using. Which brings me on to my next point, the crafting of equipment, because I really like the crafting in GreedFall. It's quite simple, but it works really, really well. Many items basically have upgrade slots, so you can invest free talent points into crafting. You get talent points every few levels to invest into whatever perks you want, but if you invest them all into crafting, you can upgrade the best quality gear. So for example, armor has free upgradable slots, and depending on your crafting skill, you can add various quality upgrades to those slots to increase the armor value or the balance percentage, or even add items that give +1 lockpicking or science skill and help you out in other sort of utility based ways. Each upgrade for each piece of armor has a completely different look for it as well. Like you have armored shoulder pads, armored wrist pads, like there's just so much depth to it. The weapons, on the other hand, have options to upgrade either their flat damage, their stun chance, or the amount of armor breakthrough that they have, because usually to do physical damage to an enemy's health bar, you must first break the enemy's armor. There are also tons of different weapons and armor sets to collect that you'll just be spoiled for choice. And each faction actually has their own armor set, so you can put them on and you can disguise yourself so you can walk into that faction's off-limits area without getting caught. And that brings me on to my next point, the sneaking. Sneaking in GreedFall just feels a bit awkward. Basically, you just make sure your foe is facing the other way, or you try and dodge them before the yellow eye fills up, and if that eye turns to red, they'll actually come and check to see what they saw. Sneaking is pretty much useless the entire game, besides from a few specific quests. But you can assassinate people from behind. It's basically just a high damage attack, though you don't actually kill them in one hit unless you've invested into the sneak skill tree, which is pretty useless, and I really wouldn't recommend doing it because it feels so unfinished and it's just not going to be of value compared to all of the other skills you can use. At least having an option to knock people unconscious so you can get around an area without harming anyone would have been nice, and it's just not a very polished system really. But I'm still glad they put it in because it does make sense and it's an additional option to complete some quests. Speaking of those different options though, the game does have lots of different talents like Vigor that lets you access shortcuts, and Charisma that increases your speech option success, or Lockpicking which lets you loot a few more chests. And you only get a talent point every few levels, so you have to be quite specific what you're going to invest into. As for the bugs in the game, there are definitely a few derping NPCs that walk into each other and herp derp in cutscenes in the background, or even block doors. And that can sometimes be quite annoying. But personally, none of this stuff ruined my gameplay experience in the slightest. But my channel is focused on Skyrim and Fallout games from Bethesda Game Studios, so take that with a pinch of salt. I do, however, absolutely love the atmosphere of all the cities, and the lighting was just incredible. The different architecture is so different in each one, and it gives each faction a unique feel and quality, right down to their armor sets as well. However, the interior of all the buildings are all copied and pasted with a bit of retexturing, and I mean, it just gets rather boring after you walk into the exact same house 40 times over. I mean, I understand the studio only has a team of 40 people and a certain amount of time. Sadly though, the NPCs don't really seem to add anything to the world at all. You can't interact with them beyond saying, "Hello, Your Excellency." Literally, whenever you talk to them, they just swoon over how posh you are. Sometimes when you're walking around a corner too quickly or outside a door, you even see them all sort of load into the game as well, which is quite unimmersive. As for the free roam and open world exploring, which is super important and my favourite part in any roleplay game, it's actually really good. The game is split into zones on a huge map, which you can see here. I haven't even discovered all of the zones yet. But once you get to a zone, it's then got its own personal map and you can explore that as well. It's very much like Dragon Age, really. Personally, I usually hate this, but it actually works really well here, and each area still felt unique and alive and very explorable, like I was actually discovering things. I wanted to run around and find things to pick up and everything to explore in all the areas of the map to discover unique collectibles or to find secrets or missable bosses. But on the whole, I really did enjoy it. However, there were some locations I discovered that I just couldn't access yet because I hadn't actually done the quest that had led me to that location. So it kind of just felt out of place and at times unfinished. I mean, at least put a guard there who has like a story that kind of fits with why you can't go there yet. To summarize though, I think GreedFall is going to be an experience unlike many other games you've played, and if you are looking for a new world to explore with meaningful, thought out factions and characters, GreedFall will definitely be a game of interest to you. However, I would probably wait for the price to come down before you buy it if you're still not sure. You'll probably not enjoy the start of this game, but you'll definitely enjoy it if you bear with it. But is that too much to ask when these days time is so valuable to us? If you guys are interested in getting GreedFall though, I've actually got an affiliate link below with 13% off GreedFall at Greenman Gaming, so if you're interested, feel free to grab a copy from there. And if you guys want to check out my walkthrough or weapon and armor location guides, they're also linked below as well. And you can subscribe and press the bell icon for more future videos from me, ESO. But I hope you guys found this review helpful. It's really just my honest opinions about the game, and if it swayed you in any way, I really do hope you enjoy it. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Goodbye.